This morning, a call to action for a family that's been there to help other people in their time of need. Logan Schonert is a Grand Forks fire captain, and his wife Melinda is a nurse who recently traveled to New York City to help with their COVID outbreak. And now they need support. Their son Kaiser suffered a serious head injury while horseback riding last month. He had emergency brain surgery at Sanford Children's Hospital in Fargo and is now beginning to regain control of some movement through his body, but he still has an unpredictable road ahead. Logan and Melinda have relocated to Fargo to be by their son's side, and they'll likely have to move again for his rehab. Friends have set up a GoFundMe account to help with the Schonerts and their medical and living expenses. You can help by searching for the Caring for Kaiser account on GoFundMe. They asked and you delivered. Giving Hearts Day 2021 now in the books, and people really came through for hundreds of nonprofits who rely mostly on donations. Nearly $22 million was raised yesterday. That shatters last year's amount by more than $2 million. Fargo City Hall went blue overnight in honor of murdered police officer Jason Moser. He died in the line of duty 5 years ago this week. He was shot while responding with other officers to a domestic disturbance on the city's north side. Fargo Mayor Tim Mahoney declared yesterday Jason Moser Day in the city on the 5th anniversary of his death. The city held a memorial service at City Hall. Officers from all over the area responded to the North Fargo standoff that night 5 years ago. It's a day they say they'll never forget, but say it's more important to think about the life that Moser lived rather than the way he died.
That he not only was a son, husband, father, brother, but he was a friend to many. He is forgotten by no one and honored by all.
It is not how these officers died that made them heroes. It is how they lived.
Moser served 6 years with the Fargo Police. He earned the Silver Star in 2012 for heroism and bravery after he and another officer rescued 2 children from an apartment fire. 8 minutes before the top of the hour now on this Friday morning, and it's a frigid start to the day. They've all been cold, but this one, it's especially cold, Lisa.
That's right. You know, it starts to kind of blend together here some of these days that have been so chilly, but today especially, we're talking widespread areas of 20 below and many more places here this morning, several more places we'll say, that are into the 30s below. On our map here this morning, Langdon, Roseau, Baudette, all checking into the 30s below right now. Fargo's at 20 below and 23 below in Grand Forks. Grand Forks at 23 below. That ties our coldest temperature so far this season in the Grand Forks. So frigid out there this morning, and factoring in it's not very windy, but even a little bit of a breeze is creating wind chills down to 57 below in Langdon. It's 47 below in Devil's Lake and a wind chill of 42 below in Valley City and Gwinner and up in Thief River Falls. Roseau's at 48 below. It feels like 39 below in Grand Forks and Fargo. So bottom line, frigid, dangerous. Take this seriously. Wind speeds not that strong, as I mentioned, up to 10 miles per hour right now. It's very cold, very dry. This Arctic air mass staying put, staying in place, and not going anywhere here for us today. And this carries over into the weekend as well. So want to be prepared as we're making our weekend plans. For your bus stop planner this morning, dangerously cold for those kids. Make sure they're layered up and covered up here this morning. Again, teens below by around 8 o'clock in Fargo, but not far off from where we are now. And then this afternoon, heading home from school, still below 0, 5 below in Fargo at 3 o'clock at 5 below there. And then Northern Valley more into the teens below to end the school day here today. And looking ahead to the weekend, big weekend for couples, and maybe you celebrate Valentine's Day with your friends too. We're looking at some cold conditions for any plans you may have. We're talking temperatures staying below 0. These are your high temperatures looking ahead to the weekend. Today, 5 below, tomorrow, 8 below, Sunday on Valentine's Day, 10 below. So, I mean, it just gets colder heading into the weekend here. But fortunately, Sunday will be the coldest here in the forecast. Once we clear Valentine's Day, we start to go up from there. We start to see that temperature tick up on your temperature trend graph here on President's Day, and then from there on out over the next 10 days, we will start to see those temperatures rise back to that average mark into the 20s here for this time of year. So relief in sight, it's getting closer, but until then, we've got a few days here where it's going to be worse in some instances. So be ready for that.
Oof, it's a hard one to take, but all right, we've been warned. Lisa, thank you for staying on top of all of this for us. A Fargo area local rapper and music promoter is a free man after criminal charges against him were dropped. Jason Grant was accused of stabbing 3 people last September. Now for months, he was facing the loss of his business and the possibility of 15 years behind bars. But Grant spent the time counting on one thing, the truth, which is that he was acting in self-defense.
I went through every emotion that you can go through, you know. I started not to believe in the system, you know. I was like, start understanding how law really works. It's not what really happened, it's what you can prove, you know. But I knew that, in my heart, I felt like the story would come out.
The state says after interviewing several witnesses, including many of the alleged victims, they can't disprove Grant's claim. All 3 assault charges against him were dropped before his trial was supposed to start. Former President Donald Trump's impeachment defense will start their opening arguments when the Senate resumes its session at noon today. House prosecutors, they argue the former president poses a future threat to democracy if he's acquitted and not barred from running for office again. President Trump's attorneys will have up to 16 hours over 2 days to present the defense, but his lawyers plan to only use 1 day. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was prepared to plead guilty to third-degree murder in George Floyd's death before then U.S. Attorney General William Barr personally blocked the plea deal last year. 2 law enforcement officials with direct knowledge of the talks say the deal would have averted any potential federal charges, including a civil rights offense. It was part of an effort to quickly resolve the case to avoid more protests after riots damaged a swath of South Minneapolis. The officials say Barr rejected the deal in part because he felt the investigation into Floyd's death was still in its relative infancy. Breaking news overnight, Tokyo 2020 Olympics chief Yoshiro Mori resigned this morning over sexist comments that he made, and the move comes less than 6 months before the postponed games were supposed to start. The former Japanese prime minister sparked an outcry of public anger when he made sexist remarks during an Olympic Committee meeting earlier this month and then initially refused to step down. He told a board meeting this morning that the most important thing now was for the Tokyo Games to be a success. There is apparently concern, though, that this resignation close to the Olympics will further erode confidence in the organizers' ability to pull off the event during a coronavirus pandemic. Some parents in Minnesota, they're arguing that the risks outweigh the benefits when it comes to student athletes competing while wearing a face mask designed to protect against COVID-19. The parents group called Let Them Play Minnesota introduced these video clips to lawmakers, with some showing athletes falling to the ground.
My son on Friday night passed out during his game because he was wearing a mask while playing basketball.
As a result of this mask mandate, my son suffered a concussion.
My daughter was participating at a hockey practice wearing a face mask when she suddenly collapsed and fell to the ice.
She was wearing a face mask and collided with her teammates on the basketball court.
The Assistant State Health Commissioner says there is no scientific evidence that shows there is a higher risk of injury by wearing a face mask, and that youth sports organizations have not reported a jump in injuries compared to this time last year. The North Dakota COVID-19 response team is asking for help in connecting people who are eligible with the COVID-19 vaccine. There are a number of ways to make it happen for someone you know. The vaccine locator on the state's health department website lists sites by city and county, along with waitlist and priority groups. If you don't have internet access, you can find a nearby location by calling the public health hotline and requesting help. The locator surveys vaccine providers for the latest up-to-date information. The North Dakota House has approved a measure that would prohibit transgender athletes from competing on teams that don't match their birth gender. Representative Ben Koppelman of West Fargo is the bill's primary sponsor and says it is meant to protect girls. Opponents argue the bill is discriminatory. The measure will now go to the Senate. Some lawmakers are already worried that if it passes, North Dakota could open itself up to litigation and lose out on national tournaments. We now want to get the answer to that question of the morning on Facebook. Our question today, 1/3 of Americans have one of these. The answer, it's a welcome mat. Need a place to kick off the snow before you head in the door. The Today Show and CBS This Morning are just about to start, but the Valley Today rolls on. More live, up-to-the-minute news and weather right now on the Fargo CW.